"They will kill us both if I marry you," she whispered through the iron bars, her trembling hands clutching his as though the world itself might collapse if she let go. The wind outside the jail moaned, like a dying animal, carrying the dust and bitterness of Red Canyon, a place that buried truth faster than it buried men. The wooden sign that read Caldwell County Jail creaked on rusty nails, swaying under a blood-red sunset. Inside, the air reeked of sweat, old whiskey, and rusted iron. Elena May stood in front of the cell, her boots sinking slightly into the dirt floor. The faint light of a kerosene lantern flickered across her face, 30 years old, but tonight she looked older, her eyes hollow from nights without sleep. Her brown hair, usually tied neat, had loosened in the wind, and her pale hands trembled as they touched the cold bars. Behind them sat Taza, the Apache warrior the town wanted dead by dawn. His wrists were shackled, his bare chest streaked with blood and dust, each breath shallow from the sheriff's interrogations. The light carved shadows along his muscular frame, every scar telling the story of battles fought, both against men and fate. His eyes, dark and steady, met hers with a softness that didn't belong to a man condemned. "You shouldn't have come," he said, voice rough like gravel. "They'll see you. They'll call you one of us." "I don't care," she replied, though her voice cracked under the weight of her fear. "I couldn't let them hang you without knowing the truth." Taza tilted his head slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting in a faint, sad smile. "You already know the truth, Nashdoitso." The word hummingbird in his tongue hit her like a whisper from another world. She remembered the night he first called her that, by the river where she'd given him water and patched his shoulder after a gunfight. Back then, she was the sheriff's fiancée, a woman raised by rules and church bells. But that night by the river had burned those rules to ash. Elena's eyes darted to the wall across the cell. The sheriff's rifle leaned against it, gleaming in the half-light, and beside it hung the ring of cell keys. So close, so impossible. "I'll come back for you," she said in a trembling breath. "When the town sleeps. I'll bring a horse, water, and food." He shook his head slowly. "If you're caught, they'll hang you beside me." "They already did," she said bitterly, tears tracing paths down her dirt-streaked cheeks. "The day they chained you, something inside me died too." Outside, thunder rolled like judgment across the plains. The wind carried the faint sound of a saloon piano from down the street, a sad tune swallowed by the storm. The sheriff's laughter drifted from his quarters above, cruel and careless as if mocking the lovers below. Taza shifted closer, the chain scraping against the floor. He pressed his fingers to hers through the bars, her skin soft, his rough and bleeding. "You should run, Elena. You've still got a life beyond this town." She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "You think I ever belonged here? These people look at me like I'm filth because I talk to you. Because I see you as a man, not a monster." He held her gaze, silent, his expression unreadable. Lightning flashed, throwing his shadow across the walls, proud, defiant, even in chains. "I will find a way," she whispered. "You'll ride free before sunrise." Taza's voice dropped low, almost tender. "And if I don't?" "Then I'll ride with you into whatever comes next," she said. "Heaven or hell." For a long moment neither spoke. The world outside raged, thunder cracking, wind howling, but inside that small cell, time seemed to hold its breath. The storm couldn't touch them. Finally, Taza leaned his forehead against the bars, closing his eyes. "You have a brave heart, Nashdoitso. Too brave for a world like this." Footsteps echoed from above, heavy, approaching the stairs. Elena's heart lurched. She stepped back into the shadows, pulling her shawl over her head. "Tomorrow," she mouthed. "At midnight." Then she turned and slipped away, her boots silent on the floorboards. The lantern flickered as the door creaked shut. leaving Taza alone with the wind and the sound of his heartbeat echoing in the dark outside. The storm broke in full, rain hammering the roof, washing the streets clean of dust and lies. But inside that jail, two hearts had already crossed a line no rain could erase, and as Taza stared into the blackness, he whispered into the void, "Elena May, if you come back, they will kill us both." He smiled, almost peacefully. But maybe that's the only way we ever live. The storm rolled over Red Canyon like God himself was furious. The sky cracked open with lightning, and the streets turned to rivers of mud. Every door was bolted, every window shuttered. No one dared venture out. No one but Elena May. Her shawl was soaked through, clinging to her shoulders as she hurried through the dark alley behind the sheriff's office. The rain disguised her footsteps, but her heart beat loud enough to give her away. Every strike of lightning lit her path and reminded her she had only hours before dawn. Inside the jail, the lamplight still burned. Sheriff Dodd had fallen asleep in his chair, boots propped up on the desk, half-empty whiskey bottle swaying beside him. The smell of tobacco and rain filled the air. Elena pressed her hand to the door, breath trembling, and pushed it open. The hinges creaked like they, too, were warning her. She slipped inside. The keys glimmered on the desk beside the sheriff's revolver. Her fingers reached out, shaking from fear and cold, then stopped when she heard his voice. Well, Dodd slurred, not lifting his head yet. Couldn't stay away from your pet savage, could ya? Elena froze. The sheriff rose slowly, the lamplight catching the cruel twist of his grin. You think I don't know what you've been up to, Miss May? Whole town's whispering. A preacher's daughter sneaking out to kiss an Apache killer. That's a sin and a scandal wrapped in one pretty package. She swallowed hard, keeping her voice calm. He didn't kill your deputy, Sheriff. You know that. Dodd stepped closer, eyes gleaming with something uglier than hate. Doesn't matter what I know. The folks here want justice, and hanging an Indian gets them peace. But you, he reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face, you could have had peace too, if you weren't so stupid. Her heart pounded. His fingers lingered too long. His whiskey breath burned her nose. From the shadows, a voice rumbled low and sharp. Sheriff, take your hands off her. Taza stood in his cell, face half in shadow, eyes blazing. His chains clinked as he stepped forward. Do that again, and I'll tear your throat out with my teeth. The sheriff laughed. Oh, you'll be plenty busy hanging by that pretty neck tomorrow, savage. That was when Elena moved. Her hand shot out, grabbing the whiskey bottle and smashing it across Dodd's skull. Glass and liquor flew everywhere. The sheriff stumbled, blood mixing with whiskey down his cheek. Taza! She gasped, grabbing the keys. Hold on. Her hands fumbled in panic as she fit one key after another into the lock until click. The cell door swung open. Taza stepped out, tall and terrifying in the dim light, rain dripping from his hair. His wrist still chained, but he was free enough to fight. Elena tossed him the sheriff's revolver. He caught it easily, eyes flashing toward her. Go, she urged. The horses are tied behind the old barn. He looked at her for one long, dangerous second, then nodded. Not without you. Before she could answer, a shotgun boomed from the stairwell. Wood splintered beside her head. The sheriff had crawled halfway up, blood on his face, rage in his eyes. Run! Taza shouted, firing back. The bullet missed Dodd by an inch but shattered the lantern. The room exploded into darkness, flames licking the whiskey-soaked floorboards. Elena grabbed Taza's hand, dragging him toward the back door as firelight swallowed the walls. Smoke thickened, mixing with rain pouring through the roof cracks. They stumbled out into the night, coughing, gasping, the storm now their only cover. Behind them, the jail burned. The sheriff screaming curses lost in the wind. They raced through the muddy street, boots splashing, lightning flashing like God's fury above them. Elena's dress was torn, her hair plastered to her face, but she didn't stop. Not once. At the edge of town, they found 2 horses tied near the barn, her father's old mare and a dark stallion she'd stolen from the corral. She cut Taz's chains with the blacksmith's hammer she'd hidden there earlier. As he mounted, she turned to look back, the glow of the burning jail reflecting in her eyes. There's no turning back now. Taza reached out his hand. Then don't. She took it, swung into the saddle beside him, and together they galloped into the wilderness, rain pelting their faces,
thunder echoing behind them. For a moment,
freedom felt real. But far behind them, through the sheets of rain, a silhouette stood watching, the sheriff, bloodied and furious, rifle in hand, swearing to the storm that he'd find them both. And as dawn crept over the horizon, the wanted posters were already being nailed up across Red Canyon. By sunrise, the rain had turned the desert road into a graveyard of puddles, and the wanted posters had already begun to flap against the wooden posts in the wind. Wanted: Apache murderer and white woman in his company. Reward: $500 dead, $200 alive. The ink was still wet when the sheriff nailed the first one. By noon, bounty riders were already in their saddles. Far from town, Elena May and Taza had found refuge in the hollow shell of a burnt-out church. The roof was half gone, the cross above the altar blackened and split by lightning years ago. It was a forgotten ruin, fitting for 2 people the world wished forgotten too. Elena knelt near the broken pews, her hands trembling as she tore strips of cloth from her petticoat to wrap Taza's wounded arm. The wound was deep from the fight in the jail, and the bandage quickly turned crimson. "Hold still," she whispered. Taza's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Rain dripped through holes in the roof, pattering softly against his scarred skin. His dark hair, now loose, clung to his shoulders, and the turquoise beads around his neck glinted faintly in the half-light. "You should have left me there," he murmured. "They'll come for you first." She shook her head. "I told you last night, I don't belong to them anymore. You belong nowhere now." "Then nowhere's where I'll stay," she said, tying the bandage tight. Outside, the wind sighed through the hollow doorway. The world felt quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that made your blood run cold. Taza looked out through the cracked window, scanning the plains. "They'll follow the river trail. It's the only one that hides tracks this time of year." Elena sank back against the wall, exhausted. Her blue dress was torn, her shawl soaked and singed at the edges. "How long until they catch us?" Taza didn't answer. He didn't have to. As the sun fell behind the hills, the distant sound of horses carried on the wind. The church walls caught faint echoes, laughter, metal, men. "Bounty hunters." Elena's breath hitched. "They're close." Taza rose, moving like a shadow. He picked up the sheriff's revolver, spinning the chamber with his thumb. It held only 3 bullets. "You take the back door when I say," he told her. She stood too. "I'm not leaving you. You will if you want either of us to live." Lightning flashed outside, white and violent, followed by thunder that shook the church timbers. The sound of boots and horses drew closer, voices calling through the rain. "Sheriff says they came this way. Tracks lead right to that old chapel." Elena's fingers tightened around the small pistol she carried, her heart pounding like a war drum. Taza looked at her, and for a moment, all the storms outside faded. "When I first saw you," he said quietly, "I thought you were a ghost. Pale, trembling, afraid. But now," his lips curved faintly, "now you look like someone who'd burn heaven down to keep a promise." Before she could speak, the church doors burst open. 5 men spilled inside, guns drawn, faces half hidden by rain hats. "End of the road, savage," one of them spat. And the lady too. Sheriff said she's worth half if she's dead. Taza stepped forward, bare chest gleaming with rain, revolver steady in his hand. You'll have to earn it. The first shot split the air. Wood splintered, glass shattered, thunder roared. The pews exploded into splinters as Taza fired twice. One man fell. Clutching his chest, another stumbled screaming into the rain. "Elena, go!" He shouted, but she didn't move. Instead, she raised her pistol, firing blindly toward the doorway. The recoil threw her backward, but the bullet found a target. A bounty man crumpled to his knees. "Taza!" she cried. He turned just as another rider appeared in the doorway, shotgun raised. Taza dove forward, dragging Elena to the floor as the blast tore through the altar. Scattering burning candles and shards of glass dot smoke filled the room, thick and choking. Through the haze, Taza fired his last bullet. The attacker fell, rifle clattering to the ground. Then silence. Only rain and the crackle of small fires eating at the old wood. Elena looked around, gasping for breath, ears ringing. 4 men lay still. One crawled toward the door, blood mixing with rainwater. Taza staggered to his feet, the revolver empty in his hand. "We can't stay," he said hoarsely. She nodded, wiping ash from her face. "Where do we go now?" He turned toward the open plains, eyes narrowing against the wind. "North, the borderlands. I know a place where no white man dares follow." Elena stepped beside him, slipping her trembling hand into his. "Then that's where we start over." As they disappeared into the storm, the burned church behind them collapsed with a sigh. The cross finally falling into the mud. And behind the smoke and ashes, the sheriff's men found the scene at dawn, 5 bodies. No survivors, but on the altar, half buried under debris, lay a piece of blue fabric and a single turquoise bead, proof enough that the fugitives were still out there, and Red Canyon would not rest until they were dead. The flames behind them painted the night sky orange, curling into clouds that carried smoke and death. From miles away, riders could see it, the old church burning like a beacon in the wilderness. Elena May rode hard through the downpour, her soaked blue dress whipping behind her as her horse stumbled over slick stones. Taza was just ahead, his long black hair plastered to his shoulders, rain running down his scarred muscular back. He guided his stallion like a creature born from thunder, no saddle, no reins, only instinct and fury. They didn't speak for miles. The storm roared louder than their thoughts. When they finally stopped, it was near the edge of the canyon, a hollowed-out cave hidden behind a curtain of vines. The horses shivered as lightning split the sky, and the desert wind hissed like it carried ghosts. Taza dismounted, scanning the horizon. They'll see the fire. They'll follow the smoke. Elena slid off her horse, her knees trembling. Then we need to keep moving. He turned to her, eyes dark and unreadable. You can barely stand. You'll fall before sunrise. I'll ride till I fall, she whispered. Better that than hanging. He stepped closer, rain dripping from his chin, his chest rising and falling with each breath. You saved my life. Now you must save your own. She shook her head stubbornly. My life's tied to yours now. I made that choice when I opened that cell. Taza looked away, jaw tight. The truth in her words scared him more than any gun ever could. They built a small fire deep in the cave, shielded from the wind. The glow danced across the stone walls, painting shadows of their faces. Elena sat wrapped in a torn blanket, her hair loose and wet, while Taza crouched near the fire, tending to his wound with silent endurance. You'll need stitches, she murmured. I've had worse. He pressed the edge of his knife into the flame, sterilizing it, then cleaned the wound with whiskey from the sheriff's flask. He didn't flinch. Elena watched him, the steadiness, the quiet strength. He was a man hunted for his blood, and yet he carried himself like a king. When the storm softened outside, she finally spoke. "You could leave me here. You'd travel faster alone." Taza glanced up, his dark eyes meeting hers. "And leave you to them?" She smiled faintly. "You're not the only one they want dead, remember?" "I remember," he said, voice low. "They'll hang you for loving me." Her lips trembled, but she held his gaze. "Then I'll die loving you." The fire popped between them, sending a spark drifting into the dark dot by morning. The smoke from the church still lingered across the plains. The world smelled of ash and wet earth. Taza woke before dawn. He moved quietly, stepping out of the cave, scanning the horizon. In the distance, faint glimmers of metal, riders. At least 4, maybe 5. They'd been found. He went back inside, shaking Elena gently. "We have to go." She stirred, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Already?" "They're close." She stood, clutching her shawl, and followed him out. The horses were restless. The air felt thick, the kind of stillness that came before bullets. They rode hard again, across the red flats where the earth turned to stone. The sun rose like blood behind them. Every hoofbeat echoed like a warning dot. By midday, the bounty riders were in sight. Distant dust clouds marked their pursuit. "They're gaining," Elena gasped. Taza looked over his shoulder, calculating. "We'll lead them to Dead Man's Bluff. That's suicide." "Maybe, but it's the only way." The cliffs of Dead Man's Bluff rose ahead, jagged red rock dropping into a canyon so deep it swallowed sound. As they reached the edge, Taza pulled his horse to a stop. The riders were close enough now to see their faces. 4 men, rifles raised, eyes hungry for reward. "Stay behind me," he said, cocking the revolver he'd stolen. Elena's hand shook as she raised her pistol. "I'm not hiding this time." The riders circled, calling out, "Drop your weapons, savage. Sheriff Dodd wants you alive if he can." Taza's voice cut through the wind. "Tell him I said no." Gunfire erupted. Bullets kicked up dust around them. Taza fired back, one shot, then another. One bounty man fell. Elena fired 2, missing the first time, then hitting a rider's arm. The others dismounted, spreading out like wolves. A bullet grazed Taza's shoulder. He grunted, staggering back. Elena screamed his name. He turned, blood streaking down his arm. "Elena, go!" "No!" He reached for her, dragging her behind a rock as bullets struck all around. "If they catch us both, it ends here." Her eyes were wild with tears. "Then let it end together." Taza's jaw tightened. He pressed his forehead against hers. Just for a second, just enough to feel her breath, her warmth. "Her life. Then we fight," he said softly. And when the next round of thunder cracked across the canyon, it was not from the sky, it was from the clash of gunfire echoing over the edge of Dead Man's Bluff. The sky over Red Mesa bled into shades of crimson and gold, a cruelly beautiful dawn that mocked the pain it revealed. The smell of smoke and gunpowder still hung in the air, clinging to the wind like a memory that refused to fade. Elias sat in the dirt yard of the sheriff's station, wrists chained, his back to the rising sun. His body bore the marks of the past day's cuts from cactus thorns, welts from the whip, and burns from iron, but his spirit remained unbroken, fierce and still. He stared toward the gallows at the far end of the yard, its shadow stretching like a hand of death. Across the dusty street, Rosalie stood between 2 deputies, her wrists bound but her chin lifted high. Her once blue dress was now a tattered shade of gray, stiff with dried blood and dirt. Even in ruin, she looked unshakable, eyes bright, with the wild defiance of a woman who had already decided her fate. They hadn't spoken since the night they were caught. Sheriff Dalton had found them near the canyon, surrounded by smoke and dying horses. A dozen men had fallen that night, half bounty hunters, half the posse that hunted them. The rest had dragged them back to Red Mesa, calling them traitor and savage, witch and murderer. Now the town had gathered to see justice done. The sheriff's voice broke through the murmurs. Elias Greyfeather, you stand accused of murder, theft, and rebellion against the U.S. Army. Rosalie Winters, aiding and abetting a known outlaw and fugitive. The sentence— I know the sentence, Rosalie interrupted, her voice cutting through the dry morning air. You'll hang us both, because we love to cross a line you drew in the dirt. The crowd shifted uneasily. The sheriff's jaw tightened. It ain't love when it ends with men dead and a town burned. Men came to kill him. She shouted, struggling against her restraints. He defended himself. He defended me. Elias lifted his head. Enough, Rosalie. His tone was calm, deep as a river in dusk. The crowd hushed at the sound. They will not see what they do not wish to see. Her eyes met his through the bars of judgment and hatred that separated them. For a moment, the world seemed to fade, the shouts, the spurs, the gallows creaking in the wind. All that existed was her trembling lips and his steady gaze. Sheriff Dalton turned to Elias. You got anything to say before the rope does its work? Elias slowly rose to his feet. Chains clinked as he stepped forward, the rising sun bathing his bare chest in a red-gold glow. You call this justice? He said softly. You burn our homes, take our land, kill our children, and call us the savages. I have seen men of your kind destroy for the sake of gold, for pride. But I have also seen mercy in the heart of a woman you'd hang for it. Rosalie's breath caught in her throat. Elias continued, his voice gaining strength. You fear what you do not understand. You fear love that crosses blood and law. But you cannot hang the wind. You cannot cage the mountain. And you cannot kill what the spirit remembers. Dalton hesitated. For the first time, the sheriff's eyes flickered not with pity, but with something close to doubt. Before he could speak, a commotion rose near the crowd. 3 Apache riders appeared at the edge of town, their horses galloping through dust and fear. Townsfolk screamed and scattered as rifles were raised. Hold your fire. The sheriff yelled, but chaos had already erupted. Gunshots cracked the air. One of the riders fell, another shouted in Apache, and the third, a woman with braids and painted cheeks, threw something toward the gallows. A flash of smoke burst through the air, blinding everyone in the square. Rosalie felt the iron grip on her arm loosen. Hands pulled her backward through the smoke. She stumbled, coughing, hearing shouts and hooves thundering away. When the dust cleared, the gallows stood empty. The sheriff stared at the hanging rope swinging in the morning breeze. No bodies, no blood. Only 2 sets of broken chains lay in the dirt dot and far beyond the ridge. Where the canyon met the rising sun, 2 riders, one bare-chested, his long black hair whipping in the wind, and one in a torn blue dress clinging to his back disappeared into the golden light. They had escaped the gallows, but the price of freedom would follow them like a shadow. The desert had spared them for now, but vengeance was patient. The canyon wind carried voices, whispers of the dead, legends of the lost, and the slow heartbeat of the land itself. To Elias Greyfeather, it was home again. To Rosalie Winters, it was both a sanctuary and a sentence. They had ridden for 3 days without rest, the world behind them burning in red dust and fury. The horses' hooves struck stone and silence, echoing through the canyon walls that rose like cathedral pillars. The scent of mesquite smoke mingled with the raw sweetness of freedom, though both knew it would not last. Rosalie leaned weakly against Elias as they climbed a narrow trail carved by rain and time. Her dress, once blue, was now earth-stained and torn. Her hands blistered from the reins. "We can't keep running," she whispered. Her voice hoarse from thirst. Elias turned his head slightly, his dark hair lifting in the desert wind. "We're not running," he said softly. "We're going home." Home. The word trembled in the air like something sacred. By dusk, they reached the heart of the canyon, a hidden hollow surrounded by red cliffs and wild sage. Smoke curled from a small fire ahead. From the shadows, figures emerged, Apache men and women, painted faces catching the last light. Their eyes widened as they saw Elias, disbelief turning into murmurs. "Greyfeather returns," one of the elders said, his voice deep as the canyon itself. An older woman stepped forward, her hair streaked with silver, her gaze sharp as flint. "And brings a white woman to our fire?" Rosalie froze, her pulse quickening. She could feel their judgment, sharp, heavy, unspoken. Elias dismounted slowly and helped her down, his hand steady on hers. "She saved me," he said in Apache, his voice low but firm. "And I saved her. Her blood has no meaning here, only her heart." The elder studied her for a long moment before replying. Then her heart must prove itself. That night, they sat among the firelight and drums. Children peered curiously from behind their mothers. Warriors watched in silence. Rosalie listened to the rhythm, deep, echoing through the bones of the earth. For the first time, she saw Elias not as the fugitive or the outlaw, but as something larger, the spirit of a people who refused to die. Later, as the fire burned low, Elias and Rosalie sat apart on a ledge overlooking the canyon. The moonlight cast his skin in silver and shadow, his long black hair moving gently in the night breeze. "I told you once," she said softly. "They'd kill us both if I married you." He turned to her, his eyes calm but distant. "They tried?" Rosalie smiled faintly, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "And yet, here we are." "Here we are," he echoed, but his gaze lingered on the horizon, where faint dust clouds moved in the moonlight, not the wind, but riders, soldiers. He rose abruptly. "They've tracked us." Within moments, the village stirred, warriors grabbing rifles and bows, women gathering children. The sound of hooves echoed faintly but grew louder. Elias turned to Rosalie, placing his hands on her shoulders. "You must go," he said. "Take the canyon trail behind the waterfall. It will lead to the old mines. Hide there." "I'm not leaving you," she whispered fiercely. He smiled, the kind of smile born from sorrow, not joy. "You once said they'd kill us both. Tonight, only one of us must die." She shook her head, clutching his arm. "Don't you dare," he kissed her, rough, desperate, the taste of salt and smoke between them. "If I fall," he said, pulling away, "the land will remember. And so will you." Before she could speak, he was gone, moving down the slope, hair flying like a dark banner. Moments later, the night erupted with gunfire. Muzzle flashes lit the cliffs. Shouts echoed like thunder. Elias stood against the oncoming riders, his rifle cracking again and again. For every shot he fired, the canyon answered with a storm of echoes. Rosalie pressed her back against the rocks, hands over her mouth to stifle her cries. The firelight below flickered, then dimmed. The drums had stopped. When the smoke cleared, dawn broke over the canyon, soft, merciless light touching blood, dust, and silence. Rosalie descended slowly, her bare feet trembling on the cold earth. She found his necklace, turquoise and bone, lying beside a pool of crimson earth. The body was gone. She fell to her knees, clutching the necklace, whispering his name into the canyon's breath. From far above, the wind carried it back, soft, eternal, like a promise kept by the land itself. The canyon slept beneath a veil of mist, its red walls painted in the pale light of dawn. Every stone, every whisper of wind seemed to carry his name, Elias Greyfeather, Rosalie Winters. knelt beside the cold ashes of the campfire. Her hands trembled as she turned the turquoise and bone necklace over and over in her palms, the only thing that remained of him. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. It had been 2 days since the battle. She had searched the canyon until her feet bled, until her voice cracked from calling his name. There was no body, only blood, only echoes. She rose slowly, the morning sun painting her torn blue dress in gold and dust. Her eyes were hollow, yet fierce, the look of a woman who had walked through grief and come out with fire in her veins. As she made her way down the canyon, she came upon a small group of Apache riders, the same tribe that had once accepted them beneath their firelight. The silver-haired elder rode at their head, his face grave and knowing. "You should not be here," he said in a voice like gravel. "I came to find him," she replied softly. "Elias Greyfeather, my husband." The elder studied her. He fought bravely. The soldiers left with many dead. But he paused, lowering his gaze. "The river took his body. The land has claimed him." Rosalie closed her eyes. The words hit like a bullet, but behind the pain, something inside her settled, not peace, but truth. She looked toward the canyon walls, where the sunlight broke through like a promise. "The land has claimed him," she repeated, her voice steady. "Then I'll stay with the land." The elder dismounted, stepping closer. "You cannot live among us. The army will come again. You carry his mark, his spirit, and their hatred." Rosalie lifted the necklace. "Then I will carry it for both of us." The old man's eyes softened. "The spirits will watch over you, Rosalie Winters of the blue dress." She bowed her head. "And I'll watch over them for him." That night, she found refuge in a small adobe ruin on the edge of the canyon. The walls were cracked, the roof half collapsed, but it stood like her, weathered yet unbroken. She lit a single fire and placed the necklace beside it. As the flames flickered, she heard it, faint like the sigh of wind through the stones. "Rosalie." Her heart froze. She turned, eyes wide. Outside, the canyon shimmered in the firelight. For a moment, she saw him, Elias, standing at the edge of the ridge. Bare-chested, his long black hair moving with the wind, his tribal jewelry glowing like stars. His eyes held the same fierce calm she'd fallen in love with. She blinked, and he was gone. Only the whisper of wind remained. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled, a sad, trembling smile that carried more strength than sorrow. "You're not gone," she whispered. "You're the wind now." The next morning, Rosalie rode out from the canyon, the turquoise necklace around her neck, her face set toward the horizon. The world beyond was harsh. Soldiers still searched for fugitives. Town still whispered about the Apache's woman. In Dry Creek, she found work at the mission, tending to children orphaned by war and disease. Some called her the ghost widow, others said she was cursed. But none dared question her eyes that held both fury and forgiveness. Every night, she'd walk outside and gaze at the distant canyons where the wind howled like drums. Years passed. Her hair turned silver. The necklace never left her neck. And one night, when the stars burned brighter than she'd ever seen, she rode one last time into the desert. They found her horse days later, riderless, near Red Mesa Canyon. Some said she'd gone mad, chasing the ghost of her Apache lover. Others whispered that the spirits had come for her, as they once had for him. But the elders of the canyon told a different story, that when the dawn broke that day, 2 riders were seen at the ridge. One, a muscular, shirtless Apache warrior with long black hair and tribal jewelry. The other, a woman in a blue dress faded by time. They rode side by side toward the sunrise, disappearing into the golden mist, and the canyon wind carried their names, Elias Greyfeather and Rosalie Winters, like a song the land refused to forget. because in the end, the land remembers what love dares to defy.